Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. In October 2022, Lucas, a 28-year-old software developer from Austin, Texas, found himself in a dire situation. After losing his job as a full-stack developer at a small startup, which Lucas prefers to keep anonymous, without notice or severance due to the company's sudden bankruptcy, he struggled to find a replacement. Despite his best efforts, the competitive job market and his increasingly desperate financial situation made it difficult for him to secure a new position. The feedback he received was always a variation of the same. "We appreciate your experience, but we have decided to move forward with another candidate." As his savings ran dry and the constant rejection took a toll on his mental well-being, Lucas was unable to keep up with his rent payments, and on November 12, 2022, he was evicted from his apartment, becoming homeless. Desperate and alone, Lucas relied on the kindness of his friends to survive. He reached out to his childhood friend Ryan, whom he had known since elementary school and had supported him through various challenges in life, including a difficult breakup and a career change. Ryan offered Lucas a place to stay, and he spent the next few nights couch surfing, moving from Ryan's place to another friend's house. On November 18, 2022, Lucas found himself back at Ryan's place, sleeping on the screened-in porch of Ryan's parents' house, as there was no free space inside that he could settle into for a longer-term stay without overstepping his welcome. Overwhelmed with despair, exhaustion, and the weight of his situation, Lucas cried himself to sleep, pleading for a way out of his circumstances. The next morning, Lucas woke up to a surreal revelation. He found himself in a comfortable bedroom at his college friend Jordan's house, surrounded by his belongings, along with some other unfamiliar items. Lucas had met Jordan during their freshman year at Austin Community College, and they had remained close friends ever since. Jordan had always been there for Lucas, offering advice and support whenever he needed it. Confused and disoriented, Lucas learned that he had been living there for several months, working as a freelance software developer. He had no recollection of how he had arrived at this point, but, grateful for the stability, he chose not to question it. As the days passed, Lucas gradually discovered the differences in his life. He received calls from clients he didn't remember working with, discussing projects he had apparently completed. He found unfamiliar clothes in his closet, noticing a more overstated style than he would typically go for. Lucas also realised that his coding setup on his computer was different from what he was used to, with different software tools that he had never used before. Despite the initial confusion, Lucas embraced his new life and adapted to his changed situation. Lucas rebuilt his financial stability, continuing to take on projects for various clients. He remained connected with old colleagues and even started dating a woman named Grace, whom he had met online. They bonded over their shared love of movies and their experiences with job loss and financial struggles. Grace had also gone through a recent period of unemployment and could relate to Lucas's challenges. Life seemed to be back on track, and the memories of his homelessness began to fade. However, on the night of February 18th, 2023, Lucas's world was shattered once more. After falling asleep at around 3 a.m, he woke up to find himself back on Ryan's screened-in porch, alone. The past few months had vanished as if they had never happened. Lucas noticed that his appearance had changed. His hair was longer and more unkempt, and he was wearing the same clothes he recalled wearing his last night on Ryan's porch. Lucas's mental state spiralled as he began to question his own sanity. Had he imagined the entire several past months? Was he losing his grip on reality? It was the correct date, though. He had just seemingly switched back from where he had switched over, albeit several months in the future. In a desperate attempt to find answers, Lucas delved into his online presence, scouring his Facebook and Instagram accounts for any clues that might shed light on what had happened. However, as he logged into his social media accounts, he was met with a startling discovery. All of his posts from the past few months, the time he believed he had spent living at Jordan's house, were gone. His profiles showed virtually no activity during that period, as if he had vanished from the online world altogether. Perplexed and increasingly unsettled, Lucas turned to his Messenger app, only to find it filled with conversations he had no recollection of having had. The messages spanned the same months he had seemingly lost, discussing events, plans, and interactions with friends that he could not remember. He reached out to some of these friends, hoping to find some clarity or validation. He hesitantly approached Ryan, Jordan, and a few others he had interacted with during these months. Lucas carefully broached the subject, asking if they had noticed anything strange or different about his behaviour or personality during that time. He braced himself for their responses, unsure of what to expect. To his surprise, his friends seemed confused by his questions, insisting that they hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. Most disturbing of all, however, was that Grace didn't seem to exist. Extensive searches on Facebook for her and her family members revealed nothing, and typing in her handle on Instagram only brought up similarly named but unrelated profiles. Lucas became increasingly obsessed with finding her, neglecting his work and relationships in the process. Another area he examined was the major news events that had occurred during the months he had seemingly spent in the alternate reality. Lucas tried to recall the most significant stories and events from his time in the other timeline, relying on his vague recollections, as he wasn't a particularly avid follower of the news. He then turned to YouTube and online newspapers to compare these events with those in his current reality, as well as examining some channels he followed for entertainment. Lucas browsed popular news stories and videos, skimmed articles, and perused the comments section, hoping to find any discrepancies that could shed light on his situation. To his surprise, he wasn't able to distinguish any noticeable differences between the two realities. The general news stories and content he remembered from the alternate timeline seemed to align with the ones he found in his current reality. This realization only deepened Lucas's confusion as he struggled to understand how his personal life could have been so drastically altered while the rest of the world seemingly remained the same. The apparent consistency of the news events and content feeds across both timelines, based on his memory and cursory online research, added another level of complexity to Lucas's already perplexing ordeal. This led him to wonder about the nature of his experience and the true extent of the differences between the two realities he had inhabited. Desperate for answers and someone to confide in, Lucas reached out to his older sister, Olivia, who had always been a source of support and guidance. He poured out his heart, sharing every detail of his unfathomable situation. Olivia listened patiently, but Lucas could see the concern and scepticism in her eyes. She gently suggested that he might be experiencing a mental health crisis and encouraged him to seek professional help. Lucas felt a mix of relief and frustration, knowing that his story sounded unbelievable, but desperate for someone to understand and validate his experience. As time went on, Lucas learned to navigate his new reality. Drawing on his experience from his alternate life, he found temporary work as a freelance developer, saving up money to get back on his feet. He approached his work with a new sense of appreciation and purpose, determined to rebuild his life and find answers to the mystery that haunted him. Lucas began to notice that his experience in the alternate life had affected his behaviour and personality. He was more proactive in seeking help, more appreciative of his friends, and more cautious about his financial decisions. Although he admits much of that was likely a result of him being forced to be so due to his circumstances. Lucas continued to search for clues and explanations, revisiting places from his alternate life in this one. He experienced déjà vu while walking through a park where he and Grace had hung out, noticing small differences in the layout and landscaping that further unsettled him. In an attempt to process his experiences and cope with his mental health, Lucas started attending therapy sessions. He gradually opened up about his experiences, and his therapist helped him work through his emotions and develop coping strategies. She encouraged Lucas to focus on the present and to find meaning and purpose in his current life rather than dwelling on the unanswerable questions of his alternate reality. Lucas appreciated that the therapist didn't try to challenge him on the absurdity of his believed ordeal. Instead, she tried to help him frame his experiences, regardless of whether she believed them to be real or not, in an effort to help him move on. As the weeks turned into months, Lucas began to accept that he would likely never understand what had happened to him. Instead, he focused on the lessons he had learned and the personal growth he had experienced in his alternate life. One day, while grabbing coffee at a local cafe, Lucas bumped into an old acquaintance from his alternate life. The man, named Matt, had been a client of Lucas's in the other reality, but in this world they had never met. Despite this, Lucas's already developed sense of familiarity and connection with Matt led him to strike up a conversation. As they talked, Lucas realised that Matt was facing many challenges similar to those he had encountered in his alternate life. This experience provided Lucas with a profound sense of reassurance that he could not have possibly imagined those several lost months. In the end, Lucas emerged from his experience with a newfound resilience and a deeper recognition of the precarity of life, as well as the implications that a shifting personal world has on our understanding of reality. His experience led him to a community of people online who had encountered similar experiences, where he shared his story. He has maintained his close friendships with Ryan and Jordan, grateful for their support. Although he never found Grace, he held on to the memories of their time together, using them as a source of inspiration and hope.